As many of you have heard, or maybe you heard it through the announcement of this little webinar, is that they have increased their prices. And with that, like, what are we going to cover? Like, what's going to be the specifics of this webinar? And really, it's the price increase, what actions you can take to kind of still maintain control of the costs overall for Microsoft's 365 products, and some important licensing reminders, little things that we do with some of our clients that help you rein in those costs. And I think you're going to like that as well. So if you're currently a Microsoft 365 customer, would you also say, like, give me a, just type 365 in the chat if you're a current Microsoft 365 customer. Okay, good. Very good. So almost everybody, it looks like, is a 365 customer, which is great. We think it's a quality product, and another thing we'd love to talk to you about down the road is SharePoint. If you're not using SharePoint as part of Microsoft's 365 product, you can get a lot of value out of it, and it's something that's already included. So touch base with us later if you want to learn more about that. If you're considering switching to Microsoft 365, but you don't have it today, then say switching in the chat. I'd like to see if there's anybody of those that are considering switching. Good question, Chris. I will answer your question about SharePoint here in a little bit. Thanks for posting that. And you're considering switching. Very good. Okay, so we will jump into that. All right, so here's what we're going to cover on this webinar, but we're going to have time for questions, so we'll get to dive into some of those fun questions. I'm a technical guy at heart, and so we may wander off into the technical wilderness a little bit, but I'll try to bring it back, okay? I'll keep it as on topic as possible here. So the prices have increased. Here's what we need to do, and let me move forward. Okay, so there's 6 products, and I'm going to break these down a little bit for you that have seen price increases. Believe it or not, it's not all the products. So it's Microsoft 365 Business Basic. Business Basic it's like Exchange. If you're familiar with Microsoft's Exchange email in the cloud, that's what it is. Except what's neat about Business Basic is if you have mobile devices, you can use Microsoft Office Suite on those mobile devices or in the cloud, just not on computers. It's not licensed for that, Business Basic. Business Premium, on the other hand, is. So Business Premium is what gives you the license to use Microsoft 365 or Office 365 on your computer, plus your mobile device, plus cloud. So that's the big difference between those two, and the majority of our clients fall into one of those two. The other products like E3, the E1, E3, E5, all have extra features added on, and a lot of times you may not need them. We only have a handful of clients that are using some of those, so I'm not really going to dive into those much. Really, though, the big difference is like an E3 or E5 license includes Windows as part of the license. Doesn't apply to most businesses who buy their computers that already have Windows on them, so you don't need to pay extra just to have that. So we won't really dive into that. So 6 products are seeing the price increase, and here's a chart that we made based on Microsoft's information on how much those have gone up. Business Basic used to cost $5, it's gone up to $6. Premium, Business Premium, this is Microsoft 365 Business Premium, not Office 365 Premium, which is a little, I know it's super confusing, but I'll try to break that down for you. Microsoft 365 Business Premium, which includes parts of Windows, went from 20 to 22. A lot of our clients are on Office 365 Business Premium, which is only $12.50, and that didn't change, luckily. So if you have that subscription, there's no change. And then some of the rest. So what you're noticing is varying percentages of increase. And like I said before, Microsoft's never increased any of these prices, but yet they've continued to add value. If we've got anybody out there using Microsoft Teams, would you write Teams in the chat? I'd like to see if anybody's using Teams today. Okay, I see a couple, 3, 4. Wow, lots of people using Teams. Great to hear it, because it's a very good value. Teams, it adds a lot of functionality in your organization without really adding much in terms of cost when you compare it to some of the competitors like Slack and those. So you're definitely getting a good value doing that. So what is the action you can take? And here's what's interesting. If you're one of our clients and we're actively managing your 365 through Microsoft, not through GoDaddy, but through Microsoft, then we've already taken some of these actions for you to keep your costs in check until March 1st of next year. And here's what that means. Number one, as a general rule, you should audit your Microsoft licenses. That means go in, get a export of all your users and licenses to see, do you have former employees that still show up, but that you're paying for a mailbox that you really don't need. And I've got something, number 3 covers that as well, but we'll get to that. Then remove unnecessary licenses. So if you've over licensed yourself, you've got too many licenses, not enough employees using those licenses, it's best to remove those so you're not paying extra. And number 3, if you have former employees, there's a little trick that a lot of people don't know. And that is you can take a standard Microsoft mailbox that's licensed to an employee and convert it to become a shared mailbox. That shared mailbox can then be given permission to someone else in your organization in case they need to get to that old email from the former employee. The benefit is you don't pay anything for a shared mailbox. So if someone leaves your organization and you know you want to keep that mail and you want to have access to it, if you convert the mailbox to a shared mailbox and you're unlicensing it now, you've got that license free to use for somebody else, or you can get rid of the license. There is a catch though, and I think that's covered on the next slide, which is monthly versus annual. And most of our clients have been on monthly, and we've converted several of them to annual recently. And the reason is because we did that by March 1st of this year when the prices went up, by locking clients into the annual plan that still bills monthly, you get the old price for another year. So we were able to save a lot of our clients that price increase until March 1st of next year instead of this year. The catch to that is with the annual commitment, if you knew your organization was going to scale down a lot, like you were going to remove a lot of employees, or you were going to basically downsize your organization, you couldn't really do that effectively with the annual plan because you're committed to those licenses for 365 days essentially. So the annual plan saves money, but you can't scale down. You can mainly just scale up. The monthly plan gives you more flexibility, but it costs more. Some of our clients actually saw their price go down a little bit on March 1st because they went from the monthly to the annual. So I know that's a little bit unclear sometimes, and if you have questions on that later, please hit me up in the question section. But I think the good news is for people who kind of proactively jumped on this, you kept your prices locked in for another year, and then March 1st of next year, you'll see a difference. So let's move on here. Right, and notice this, a monthly subscription will be priced up to 20% higher. It's not 20% higher across the board, but it could be up to 20% higher than if you go with an annual subscription. So we've really been educating our customers about how to move to annual subscriptions more because it gives you that price break. And as long as, like I said, you're not going to need to scale back a lot, it's definitely worth it. Good news is, like I said before, you can take a former employee's mailbox, make it a shared mailbox, then reuse that license for a new employee. So you have a net change of 0 essentially when someone leaves your organization. Okay, so maybe you're managing this on your own, or maybe you have another IT provider that you're working with, notify them if you want to ever disable the auto renewal. And that really applies to your annual subscription customers. If you're on annual today and you're thinking to yourself, you know what, I'll pay more monthly to have the option of really shrinking it later, then you're going to want to tell them, hey, set my account to not auto renew. It's just a tip that we've learned, because otherwise you'll get to the end of that renewal period, it'll auto renew. Now you're stuck for another year. Here's another tip that's a little off topic, but I want everybody to know this, is if you're using 365 for your email, for your office software, maybe for SharePoint, which we'll cover in a second, all that data that's in the cloud, Microsoft only provides 30 days of backup normally. Their normal is 30 days. If you know you need more than that, which majority of our clients do, then you need to add an extra service on top of that. And we use a third party for that. It's called Dropsuite, which gives you Office 365 backups. The thing that's interesting about Microsoft's terms and conditions is it says that you're responsible for your own backups. So just keep that in mind, that they're guaranteeing uptime, but they're not guaranteeing they can get your data back if something happens, if you get attacked by hackers or something like that. So we do what's called cloud to cloud, go from Microsoft's cloud to a third party's cloud, so you don't have all your eggs in the Microsoft basket, and that way you can restore lost data if needed. So seat counts can be increased on a subscription at any time, like we talked about before. So if you're on the monthly or you're on the annual, you can go up. You can add more seats. If you're on the monthly, you can then shrink, because next month you have the opportunity to lower it and your price goes back down. If you're on the annual, it stays steady. Here's the second bullet point's important though. If you're on the annual and you increase your seat count and you realize, hey, I added 3 more licenses, but I only need 2 more licenses, you can then, within 72 hours, cancel one of those licenses, and you don't get penalized for that, so to speak. So, so that's an important thing to know, is you got 72 hours when you add licenses to shrink licenses back. And I see a question in the question and answer, and I'll get to that here in just a second. So if that subscription change is not canceled within the first 72 hours, you will be billed for the remainder of the subscription term. So if that's annual, that's annual. If it's monthly, then it's just monthly. So just keep that in mind. It's something we watch closely. Like when our clients say, hey, please add 2 mailboxes for 2 new employees, and then they go, oh, one of those isn't going to start for a month, then we will go back in and remove that so you don't have to pay for it, right? So that's just a little tip. So when did it increase? It increased on March 1st, as we said before. And they actually delayed it a little to the 14th for certain organizations, but most people went up on March 1st. Now we're getting to the question and answer. So let me I see an answer here from I don't know if it's pronounced Ricky or not, but it says, are the Microsoft Office 365 apps that should be stored in the cloud, or is it just the data that one creates with the apps? That's a good question. Really, it's kind of both. The data that you create with Microsoft's 365 apps can be stored in the cloud. Not all of it is. If you use something called OneDrive or SharePoint, then those files that you create are stored in the cloud. The apps themselves are really just the programs. And if you have a Office 365 subscription, you can log in and download the apps. Like say you've got a brand new laptop and you have that subscription, you can download Outlook and Word and Excel and all of that, as long as you have the right subscription. So those apps are just kind of static in the cloud. They get upgraded by Microsoft every so often, and they can be downloaded. But what's really stored in the cloud is your data. So if you're using Outlook, all your email is stored in the cloud, and that has some major benefits, right? For examples, if you're using a mobile device, right? Now all your emails kept in sync between your computer and your mobile device and everywhere else, and you have that little bit of element of backup. And like I said, I recommend you add additional backup on top of that. What other questions you guys thinking of? I'd like to answer some more if you have them. And the way you can do that, by the way, is if you go to the Zoom toolbar, there's a Q&A button right there. If you click that, you can type a question. And yeah, good question. I saw it in the chat about SharePoint. So while we're waiting, let me tell you a little bit about SharePoint. SharePoint is, I want you to imagine if today, if you have a local file server and all your files are on your server, certainly nothing wrong with that. It's the way we've done it since the beginning of computing and networks, really, is to have a local file storage for your files. What SharePoint does is a little bit different. SharePoint says you're going to store those files in the cloud, but it operates like your file server, so that you have shares, you have permissions to those shares, so you can have departments that access just the accounting files. For example, you might have just a couple of people with permission to access accounting, and you might have more people that are allowed to access clients folder or vendors folder, for example. So SharePoint is like taking your file server, putting it in the cloud, setting up all the permissions the same way. What are the real benefits to that, right? So yeah, so someone says it sounds similar to Dropbox. It is, except it's better at working for teams. So if you're a group of people working together, SharePoint is a little bit better from a permissions perspective, making sure people have only what they need access to, right? And what it does, like you mentioned Dropbox, is you then have access to those files anywhere. So on your mobile device, on your laptop, when you're out of the office, when you're in the office. As we've seen this trend just grow, remote working is here to stay for sure. And so SharePoint kind of gives you that functionality to make for more of a hybrid work environment where you're working in the office, you're working out of the office, and always having access to your files when you need them. So just keep that in mind. Can you buy SharePoint on its own? That's a good question. I don't even know the answer. I need to check on that. You used to be able to. I don't know with the evolution of licensing how that works. I would think that you could, but you used to be able to buy it separately than Microsoft 365. Main difference between SharePoint and OneDrive. Yeah, so OneDrive, think of OneDrive as primarily your own files, and SharePoint as more of like your file server. So the way we typically use it with our customers is SharePoint is like your file server used by many people, and OneDrive is typically where we store people's own individual documents that only they have access to. Now, OneDrive does have the ability to be used in Teams type function, but it's not as good as SharePoint is. One real benefit to everybody on this webinar is if you have 365, Microsoft 365 or Office 365 today, you already have this, and you don't need to pay extra for it. So it can be a real game changer depending on your business, right? So Bella, who works she's our marketing director, she just commented and said that now that her files are on SharePoint, she can take her Office with her everywhere. And she does, as long as she has an internet connection. And so Bella actually works off of a Mac computer, a MacBook Pro. So that's another benefit is doesn't matter which platform you're on, PC or Mac, SharePoint works across all of them. And so it allows us as a team to seamlessly work off of one set of files. She's out of the office, I'm in the office, she's on Mac, I'm on PC, it doesn't matter. The keys that you need to remember though are you need good backups and you need good cybersecurity, which is a whole different topic. You need good security no matter what, but you can't assume that just because they're in the cloud that you've got these great backups and the security is perfect, because it's not. It's the same as if it's on your file server essentially. So what other questions? You guys have any other questions? If not, we'll wrap it up. And like I said, we're gonna have a recording of this available if you want to share it with anybody. And we'll send it out to you guys too if you want to rewatch or fast forward to a certain point. Just let me know if you got any last minute questions here. I said we'd keep this pretty short, and we did. what's the best way to get and do SharePoint? That is a good question. You can, I know a few organizations that have done it by them on their own. You got to be fairly technical to kind of get the process started and up and running. My organization, my company, Juern Technology, we do managed IT services. We are averaging about one SharePoint migration or project every single month. We're doing at least one a month for customers. And the way we do it, we take your file server, we mirror all those files to SharePoint, set up the permissions, make sure everybody has access, give you some video tutorials on how it works, and make sure you're comfortable with it. And then we'll help you just maintain your file server as a backup or as kind of an extra backup from that point on. So, so that's really one way to do it, is hire an expert. If you want to do it on your own, you're just going to have to really dig in, because there's a fair amount to set up the structure, like creating the folders and the permissions and all of that. So good question. And we do have something I wanted to offer to anybody on the call as well, is we have some security tools. If you're worried about your Office 365 security, we have some security tools that we'll do this for you for free if you're on this webinar live. And what we'll do is we'll do an analysis of your 365. A lot of you may be current clients. If you're current clients, we may have already recently done this for you, but if not, we'll do it. And what happens is we check the settings on your 365, and we also check the security. I'll tell you a story about something that happened today, actually, on my way into work. A close friend of mine who has a great construction business calls me on the phone. He's like, hey, I just want to tell you something that happened, really need some advice. And what happened is he has his construction business, and he has another organization that runs part of the project. And so they handle kind of the accounting pieces, and he handles kind of the construction pieces. Well, that accounting person, someone sent them a phishing email. And what happened is that phishing email asked that person to put in their Office 365 credentials. So they tried to log in. When they clicked on the link in the email, they tried to log in. It didn't go anywhere. So they thought it was just a bug or a glitch, and they didn't think anything of it. Well, what happened at that point, the hackers have now captured that person's 365 credentials. So they now logged into her mailbox without her even knowing, and just start reading through her email to discover that she has communications going on with my friend who has the construction company, where this hacker now knows that the construction company is requesting a check for $170,000. So what they did is they registered a domain name very similar to the construction company, took a snapshot of his email signature, created a mailbox, emailed the person in accounting and said, hey, I don't want you to mail the check. I need you to ACH it to this location. Well, that person in accounting didn't do any kind of independent verification, didn't call, didn't check, and just sent that money ACH. And so far, they've not been able to get that money back. And so how do you protect yourself from things like that? If your email's in the cloud, how do you prevent hackers from sending phishing emails and logging in? And there's a simple answer to that if you have 365, and that's using what's called multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication. It's a feature of 365. You can just turn it on. So if you have IT support, you may want to reach out to them and do it. If you're one of our clients and you haven't already done this, we're going to highly recommend you do it. But let us know. This analysis that we run on 365 will tell us things like that. Like, do you have multi-factor turned on for every customer? So that you can really stop a lot of those kind of major fraud events from ever happening, because it wouldn't matter. Even if they captured your username and password, they still wouldn't be able to log in to your 365 account without with multi-factor turned on. So I know that's pretty technical, but let us know if you have any questions about that. Bella posted her email in the chat. So if that is something you have a question on, please let us know. If you're still on and you have another question, please post it. I'll answer a few more, and then we're and we'll wrap it up. And appreciate everybody being online today. There we go. Back to the Q&A slide there. I see one of our clients online. Won't say who that is, but if you have GoDaddy, some of these things apply and some of them don't. So we can answer some of those questions independently, but GoDaddy sells Microsoft 365 as well. And our recommendation with those is eventually to move away from GoDaddy for 365. We've just found that going direct to Microsoft is a better experience, and in the long run, it actually costs less when we've done the comparison. So anyway, that's maybe a question you guys had there. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions come in. Thank you so much for joining us. I know this was a quick webinar. We just wanted to get this information out there. We're trying to do more of these kind of things to find relevant information that's really going to help a lot of people. So if this was helpful to you and you know someone that could really benefit from it, once we have the recording go out, we'd love it if you'd share that. It'll help us to just want to keep making informative videos. So thanks for everybody for being on. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you on the next one.